Greetings. Welcome again to the Daily Bread Bible Study. We are looking at day number 12 for Sunday, January 12th, 2020, Genesis 39 through 41. So let's get back into the story of Joseph and see what God is doing with him in this story. So Joseph has a low time. He gets sold off by his brothers, and he is bought by Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. So, with Potiphar coming to ownership of Joseph, he looks upon Joseph and sees that God is with him, and that with the Lord's blessing upon him, Joseph is appointed to be the overseer of all of Potiphar's house. And just as Joseph's future kind of looks up, we see some conflict induced. Potiphar's wife then realizes there's something special about Joseph and makes advances upon him. And being a man of character, Joseph refuses those advances and leaves. But we'll tie in this kind of narrative thread, we'll pull it out in this piece of clothing, in this dishonesty, just kind of like his brothers. Potiphar's wife also finds a garment and uses that to deceive people. So Joseph has his garment that is left behind as he leaves, and she takes it into a lie in order to convict Joseph of a deed he did not attempt, did not even think about, and thus he is arrested because of Potiphar's wife lying. Joseph could be killed a second time. This is another opportunity for him to die, but like that narrative thread, he is blessed by God in that his life is preserved, and he is just arrested instead of being killed. While imprisoned there in the Pharaoh's prison, we see that Joseph, even as his misfortunes continue, he does find favor with the jailer and is assigned to another role of leadership in a different household. So, what do you think it is about Joseph, why he continues to have this privilege and blessing put upon him, even in the midst of adversity? What gifts from God help him prosper, even as he is subdued over and over again? So I'd love to hear your feedback on that. We'll step in a little bit more too to see just another blessing that he has, another gift from God, and look at chapter 40. So the confined Joseph then uses his skills of dream interpretation. He is a man with many gifts and many blessings from God. Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and Pharaoh's chief baker, they both have dreams. And Joseph, listening, is able to interpret the rise of the cupbearer and the demise of the baker. Telling the cupbearer to remember him when he is reinstated, Joseph waits. And he waits, and he sees his words come to pass quickly. And he continues to wait, but the cupbearer forgets him. Because on the third day, in which the Pharaoh's birthday occurs, in Genesis 40:20 it says, he made a feast for all of his servants and lifted up his head to the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his cupbearing, that's fun to say, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But the chief baker he hanged, just as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. We see in chapter 41 that these misfortunes just continue for Joseph. Yet this becomes part of his story. In fact, this becomes so much a part of his story that it eventually leads to his son being named, his second son. In Genesis 41:52 it says, the second son he named Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my misfortunes. Turns that title into a name, Ephraim, into his second son. So Joseph, practicing resilience. We pick it up in chapter 41, that we find out after 2 years that Pharaoh dreamed, there in verse 1. And so I'd like to cut it off there because we can read a lot about the dreams. It's very detailed in the scripture, and it gets repeated in several different places. What the interpretation of the dream about the thin and ugly cows that ate up the first 7 fat cows, and then thin ears which swallow up the good ears, the 7 good ears. And so Pharaoh is wondering who can interpret it. None of his magicians, none of his wise men are able to be successful. But then the cupbearer remembers this guy Joseph, who interpreted his dream, and it came to pass, even as he had said. So Pharaoh, interested, invites Joseph to come in Genesis 41:15 through 16. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. And Joseph answers Pharaoh, it is not I, but God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Joseph then interprets the 7 years of plenty through God and 7 years of severe famine, yet again told by God. Joseph then advises Pharaoh to select a man to be able to manage his affairs, manage the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine that are in fact coming and he sees will come. And Pharaoh decides that, yes, this is good wisdom. You take that 20% of the produce and store it for the future. That sounds good. Who should I pick? Well, in verse 38, we have an answer. Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find anyone else like this guy? The one whom is the Spirit, one in whom is the Spirit of God. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all this, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only with regard to the throne will I be greater than you. All these misfortunes, all these challenges, all these possible times where he could have been killed, lead up to this point where Pharaoh appoints Joseph second in command of all of Egypt. God has truly blessed him and give him not just leadership roles, but the second primary leadership role, to be under Pharaoh, to have influence and say, to be able to provide for a lot of people's their redemption, their salvation in some sense, their life being maintained and delivered from this famine that is to come. We see that God turns Joseph's misfortunes into another blessing, and then Joseph prevents this misfortune for the whole rest of the world. This one who had misfortunes come upon himself, he took that and turned that into blessings for other people. I give thanks for my family. That's exactly the story that I've received from my family, of taking the misfortunes of both my grandfathers passing away and my great uncle passing away during the Depression, and yet even in the midst of that, God blessing and sustaining my family. So this whole story really hits home for me, and giving thanks for resilience in the midst of misfortune is very important. The plan is enacted by Joseph, and the 7 years of abundance leads to food beyond measure, innumerable like the sand in the sea. And then the 7 years of famine hit, and everyone around becomes in great need. So at the end of chapter 41 and verse 57, it says, Moreover, all the world came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain, because the famine became severe throughout the whole world. This famine then leads to the greatest reversal of all. Joseph, a slave sold off by his brothers, the one who had the early dreams of stars and these leaves bowing down to him, the ears. Joseph's dreams come true, and we will soon see his family bowing down to him, which is where we will pick it up for tomorrow. So thank you for joining me for the Daily Bread Bible study. It's been day number 12.